think probably the most important purpose for the U.S. Supreme Court, the Supreme Court of the United States, is? For my money, in my mind, there are a couple of major purposes for which that court exists. One of them is to sort of be the court of last resort when a case has been heard to the degree and the level that the people who have, heard that court have taken it to the nth degree and it can't go anywhere else but to the Supreme Court. And that's an important thing. But the thing that actually I think is as important or more important in my mind is the idea of that Supreme Court as a body trying to determine whether or not a particular thing meets, as it were, the guidelines found in the Constitution. And this is really important because the problem is that there are a lot of people out there who can and will write laws that will not do that. This is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt. Today is Tuesday, the 27th of July of 2021. Welcome to everyone who's here on Rumble on the podcast and on YouTube. And today we're talking about SCOTUS, or the Supreme Court of the United States, and constitutionality. So that's why this was the subject that I came up with today, and for some reason it kind of struck me that I needed to talk about this a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and read through my notes real quick. It's not the SCOTUS's only job, but it's an important one nonetheless. They have plenty to do. They're essentially the court of last resort for many. That said, one of the more important jobs the Supreme Court does is to help determine the constitutionality of various and sundry laws drafted at any number of different levels. Even if they fail to decide many cases, which, mind you, is not a good thing. If they work to clarify what laws are and what laws are not constitutional, they will have accomplished a lasting goal. This is why it's so very important to have principled people on the highest court of the land. It's also why so very many are upset when people they assumed were going to act as they should by looking at base law in the ways it was written rather than in some new or supposedly better way. That's also a large part of the reason so many want for the court to be protected from various machinations of a number of folks in the legislative class. It's bad enough that people insist on electing and keeping in power folks who at best suffer from weak moral character. All of this having been said, one important thing to consider is the importance of the SCOTUS in determining constitutionality. We've already seen too many cases where this has been done wrong. The last thing we need is for that court to be filled with pollutants. As it is, it appears many seated there refuse to do their job. That needs to stop, and stop now. I'm not sure how we accomplish that. And that's the end of my notes. Let me go ahead and get on with what I have to say about this. To begin with, look, it's horribly obvious that it's important for us to concern ourselves with the Supreme Court ensuring that at various levels laws are not drafted that are in contravention to the Constitution and any other sort of overarching law. And the overarching law also needs to not be in contravention of that. And so this is the thing. If the federal government puts a law in place and that law is unconstitutional and the state governments go, no, that's not your right, and they put another law in place, they're actually the ones who are doing something that's constitutional and the federal government isn't. But the point of all of this is that we need to make it our business to ensure that we don't have a Supreme Court that is doing a bad job of determining constitutionality. Let me give you an example, right? An example of this is Roe versus Wade. Now, you might ask yourself, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with Roe versus Wade? The answer to that is it's not the federal court's job. It's not the Supreme Court's job to decide whether or not abortion should occur. That's a states' rights thing. It's not something that the federal government has as enumerated powers. So it's not something that they ought to be doing. So the fact that that's being determined at a federal level is wrong. Marriage, well, to begin with, it's a legal construct, and I don't really believe in it to begin with as a legal construct. I do believe in it as a thing for Christianity, and I suppose you could make an argument for it for other religious beliefs, though I don't agree with that. Being a Christian, I can't really. That's okay. They can still do what they think is right, but that doesn't give it any standing in my mind or my eyes. That having been said, though, marriage is not a federal decision. It's not something that in any sense should be decided on a federal level. It just shouldn't. That's just not something that it should be doing. So when the federal government decides to make any statement about what marriage is or isn't, that's in error. It's mistaken. That is something that should be determined on a state-by-state basis. Now, there will be people who will make the argument that if you do that, then this state will recognize the validity of a given marriage, and that state won't. But that's totally acceptable. There's nothing really wrong with that. And what that means is if you get married in Tennessee and you want to be considered married in Texas, you better by golly make sure that you meet the requirements to make it so that you're married in Texas, period. If that's a problem for you, maybe you don't want to be married that bad. And if you can't do that, then maybe you're asking for something that makes it so that Texas isn't a great place for you to be. Okay, that's what you need to realize. But the point of all of this is, that means any law that talks about marriage on a federal level is broken, and any precedent or law that talks about abortion on a federal level is equally so. There are other issues that are not federal issues. I don't know how I feel about, for example, slavery. I don't mean whether or not I like slavery. Slavery's bad, and there's no doubt of that, and there's no question of that. And I would hope that my state would hold the idea that it was bad, and if they were ever tasked with deciding that, and would never do anything to further the idea of slavery in the state in which I live. And frankly, I hope that every other state would follow that. Is that something the federal government should be deciding? Well, that's another matter entirely, and I'm not sure that it's one that's been correctly placed in their court. It isn't a question of whether or not I like slavery. It's a question of who should be making that decision, right? Now, I think probably it's a states' rights issue. Again, my hope would be that every state would say, nope, slavery's bad, and be done with it. That would be my hope. That being said, I do not believe it is the job of the federal government to make those decisions. I just don't. And I believe that if they're doing that, they should step off and allow the appropriate entities to make those decisions. That being said, right, again, the real question here, the real thing that I want to get to is the idea of the Supreme Court deciding the constitutionality of various edicts that find their way up to it. And I do believe that that's something that they should be doing. Does the state of New Jersey have onerous laws with regard to bearing the right to bear arms? Well, according to the Second Amendment to the Constitution, as far as I can see, the answer is it shouldn't. So if it does, there becomes a question of the constitutionality of such a law, such requirements. I don't care how they're enforced. I don't care if they're enforced as laws or ordinances or regulations or what. As far as I'm concerned, if it's onerous, that's in direct contradiction to the Second Amendment of the Constitution, which specifically says that the federal government has, or that nobody has the right to take that from the people. That's the point. Federal government doesn't have any right with it any more than anybody else does. I point out that the First Amendment specifically talks about what the federal government can do. That said, it's my hope that the constitutions of every state mimic that same sort of language that tell you that you're free to practice your religion, you're free to speak, you're free to assemble, and so forth. Petition the government for redress of grievances and all of that. I would hope that every state takes that same perspective. But the point is that the states, or that the federal government and that the Supreme Court of the United States in particular should be, and as one of their more important tasks, determining the constitutionality of various laws made at various levels. All right, I've already stepped over my time, and again, this is one of those subjects that if I had the time, I would talk a lot more time on. Since I don't, I'm going to go ahead and pack it up now. This is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt. Today is Tuesday, the 27th of July of 2021. That means tomorrow will be Wednesday, the 28th of July of 2021. Thank you for everybody who's been here on Rumble, on the podcast, and on YouTube. Remember, Rumble is my preferred platform because I don't see the censorship there, and I would like to know if anybody does, because that probably is a sign that I need to go somewhere else as well, just to make sure that things are getting heard and that I'm not supporting strictly platforms that keep other people censored. On Rumble, you can give me a positive or a negative Rumble. Whichever you feel the need to do. On YouTube, you can give me a like or a thumbs up, a dislike or a thumbs down, whatever you prefer in that realm. And on both Rumble and YouTube, you can give a comment to make it so that I can know what it is that you're thinking and why it is that you agree or disagree, or things that I might need to add to what I'm saying. The subject of today's discussion has been the SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, and Constitutionality. Tomorrow we're going to talk about a subject that I don't hear many people who are not ex-military, and particularly Air Force, talk about, and that subject is what was referred to as EFIs, or essential elements of friendly information. I want to pass on a little bit of my, quote, wisdom, and you can count that air quoted, quote, wisdom, with regard to what information you share and with whom, and what doing that can mean to you and to your security and your ability to be protected from people doing things to you. All right, I need to go ahead, as I say, and sign off now. I hope you're having a good day today. Today is working towards that middle day of the week. That'll be tomorrow, that hump day, as a lot of people say, which is Wednesday. Hope that things are going well for you, and hopefully we will, in fact, see you again on Wednesday's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video is recorded on Tuesday, the 27th of July of 2021. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.